And so that was sort of my first taste of this idea that, actually taking these breaks made me more productive.
Welcome back to the Faculty Factory podcast, everybody. It's Kim Skorupski from Hopkins, and we are doing the Triple H, the habits and hacks from Hopkins. And on today's episode, we have Dr. Gabriela Cantarero. Gabriela, hello. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I'm so pleased that you decided to join us because I know you have something interesting to share with us. I remember you in our leadership courses and all the offerings we have in the OFD. I always see your smiling, happy face. You're one of the few people who always has your camera on. So I always appreciate that, being the extrovert person that I am, to see you. And so what habits and hacks did you want to share with the podcast audience today?
Thank you for acknowledging that as a fellow extrovert. I know how it feels to be staring at, quote unquote, a room of just blank screens is just the most awkward thing. So I'm glad. I'm happy to help anytime by turning on my camera for you.
Thank you. Hang on a second. I just forgot to introduce you. I want you to tell people who you are here at Hopkins, what you do, your expertise.
Yeah. So I'm an assistant professor in the physical medicine and rehabilitation department. I've been at Hopkins as a faculty a little over 3 years now. And I've had sort of, quite the zigzag life in terms of where my academic interests have gone. But I would say overall, I've always sort of had an interest in motor control and motor learning. So I did my PhD in neuroscience, and I began with studying some of the neurophysiological mechanisms associated with retention of motor learning. Later on, I ended up actually serving as an Army scientist. So I worked at Walter Reed Army Institute of Research. And there I started doing work studying the effects of repetitive concussions on things like motor control and motor learning. And then when I came back to Hopkins now as an assistant professor, then my work started evolving more into the brain-machine interface project. So there again, I'm interested in understanding the neurophysiology of motor control and motor learning, but now using sort of what I feel like is a more sci-fi approach in the sense that now I can, look at actual neuronal recordings inside of humans and getting a chance to kind of peek under the hood in terms of what physiological processes happen, whereas before I always had to kind of look at it through a more non-invasive means. So that brings me to today. And basically, I would say in terms of my hacks in life is I know myself to always be kind of like a gold star achiever. Mm-hmm. So I can remember back from elementary school, like for me, when the teacher was like, all right, if you do this thing, I will give you a gold star. For me, having that sort of like, here's a task and there's a reward, is kind of like always resonated with me. My personality has always sort of thrived off of that, like do the work and you get some sort of reward. And so unfortunately, as I've gotten older in life and became, now faculty, no one gives me gold stars anymore, no matter what I do. It's few and far between. So
but you're giving me an idea for the Office of Faculty Development. Maybe this is we can get back, talk about getting back to basics.
I would love it. If, at the end of the year, when you get your review, there's like, all right, here's your gold stars for things that you've been doing well. I would love it. I would eat that up. That would make me so happy.
That or that in an OFD, like a virtual refrigerator door, so that everybody could get a magnet with all their great stuff magnetized and taped to the refrigerator door. There you go. There's a great virtual refrigerator door idea.
Yes. So I would be the first one to sign up for that if that ever comes to fruition. But basically, I had to kind of learn ways that I could do that for myself. And I've sort of set it up in a way that I think actually makes me feel a lot more productive throughout the day. So typically what I do is I might have my list of like certain tasks that I'm hoping to get done in that day or certain like small baby steps that I want to do. However, I always give myself like a little bit of a treat of what I get to do once I finish that task. However, what I use for a treat is maybe it's particular to me. I don't know if other people feel this way as well, but one of the things that I find that sort of helps relax me or helps kind of balance me from science is sort of doing very like hands-on physical tasks. Because one of the things that sometimes is fun but also frustrating with science is that you can spend a lot of time working on a problem, trying to solve a problem, and you don't necessarily have like, here's my finished product right away. That can take weeks, months, or even years,
right,
depending on what it is that you're trying to produce. And so for me, I need more instant gratification. So doing things like building a piece of furniture, for example, I find super rewarding.
Because
it's like,
we've just entered
I kid you not.
You build furniture. This is a first on the Faculty Factory podcast of hearing what faculty members do. You build, so you are super tactile.
Well, yeah. So I would describe it more as like household duties. So, something where it's like I put in the time and I have like an immediate finished product. So like constructing something I love. So like putting together a piece of furniture or cleaning a counter, something where I'm like, all right, here I see the counter.
Yeah.
I spend X amount of time cleaning it and then it's done. And I have that sort of instant gratification of, look, I accomplished it. Here, check that item off my box. I've done something.
I see. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I interspersed that actually throughout my day. And so the funny thing was, when I used to go into the lab, into the office, it's a little bit trickier to find these sort of like instant gratification tasks. It would be something like, oh, clean this part of my desk, or, oh, I get to like go water my plants, or actually realistically, what I used to really enjoy doing is like I could go for a run. So if I completed a task, my reward was I got to go to the gym, do a run, lift some weights or something like that. And then I would come back to the lab or the office and then, do whatever the next task was. Mm-hmm. Working from home has actually increased my ability to do that tenfold. And it's weird because I feel like it's actually helped improve my productivity unexpectedly. So it's sort of like I'll have little chunks throughout the day where it's like, all right, I need to sit down and I need to, review this student's paper. Like that's the task. And then I'll say, all right, after I finish the task, you know what? I've been like, doing this household project of like staining my fence. This is a true story. I've spent a lot of time staining, this outdoor space. And so I'll be like, all right, once I review this paper, I can stain one panel. And so I have sort of, it's weird. It's like almost like therapeutic where it requires zero thought. Like I'm just kind of doing some mundane task. And then when it's done, I can step back and be like, yes,
accomplishment.
I finished this panel. I'm one step closer to finishing, staining my whole entire back fence.
Wow.
And then, I go back and I'll have another thing that I'm working on. And then this time, let's say I'm submitting an abstract for something. So once I finish working on, let's say a draft. So my goal is to get a draft for this abstract. I finish the abstract draft and then my reward is I can go for that run. I'm really close to a park, so I can just step outside and it doesn't have to be an insanely long run. It's just, maybe a couple miles. And then I come back and it's just like, it resets me. Mm. So then when I come back to sit down, like I feel refreshed.
Yeah.
I feel sort of like ready to tackle the next project. And it's just sort of like alternating back and forth between just spending a lot of time really concentrating on, sort of a work task and then having a little break where I get to leave my desk, clean the kitchen, maybe go for a run, assemble some furniture piece that's been hanging out in my garage. Or, I love purging. I've gotten really into purging things that I don't need in the house. So I get to walk around and find a few more things that I want to purge and donate to Goodwill. And then I switch back and I do my work. So it just makes me feel so productive, like not only in my work life, but then in my home life, because things get cleaned so much more regularly than when I used to go into lab. Or, my exercise routine, like I can just insert it in the middle of the day, which I find actually so much more useful than when I do it at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So like if I go for a run, at 2 p.m. and I come back and I sit back down at my desk by 3, it's like, whew, I have just like reset. I'm ready to tackle something else. Mm-hmm. Versus when I would spend, the whole day at work and then I wouldn't go to the gym until like 6. And then, you do get this kind of like burst of energy, but now that burst of energy is like just to go home and hang out or cook dinner or something like that. And I've even been like trying out all these new kind of kooky recipes where normally, I come home from work and I only have a half hour, maybe an hour to cook something. And so it sort of like limits what I can do. But now I can be like, all right, I'm going to try some new crazy recipe that maybe it has to marinate for a few hours. And so it's one of my breaks. Yeah. I do my work and then I get to go downstairs, make my marinade, shove some chicken in there, throw it in the fridge. And then by the end of the evening, it's actually ready. It's been surprisingly cool.
I think I find this fascinating on so many levels, Gabriela. And one that pops into my mind is you're describing exactly what the psychologists talk about. And when you do create new habits or to create a habit where, like, for example, Charles Duhigg in The Power of Habit, he talks about this loop of there's a cue, there's the behavior, and then the reward. And that, gets us in this kind of positive reinforcement loop of enjoying what we're doing. And you've described that perfectly and obviously identified those rewards that work for you. So I share your interest in fitness and running and working out. And that's also been my reward at the end of the day, back in the olden days when we went into an office space. But like, to me, to stain a fence deck, that would be like the most punishing thing, because I did it and I had to do 3 coats over 3 weekends. And I thought, if I ever have to do this again in my life, I will pay thousands of dollars, maybe not thousands, but I'd pay easily $1,000 for someone to do this for me because I hated it. But what I find fascinating about the way you describe this is that it's so, on the surface, so simple, because we hear about this our whole lives of like, take breaks, get up, get a drink of water, every 5 minutes, stop looking at your screen. And we are like, yeah, blah, 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 blah. We know that we're supposed to do these things to socialize, to get up, to stretch, to move, to breathe, to think, to whatever, but we don't do them. And this pandemic, I think, has forced a lot of us, forced us into thinking differently. And what you've described to me is just such a natural way of being for you, because so many of us have forced ourselves into these prescribed workday schedules of being in the office at this time in the morning and working all day and then leaving at the end of the day and then cramming life in around that prescribed formula of the way one works. And you're describing something that is just obviously much more natural and organic, and it feels good, and it fits in with your biorhythms and your circadian rhythms and just the way you work. And so to me, this is again another example of a silver lining of this whole crazy year, showing that there are other ways of being and doing. And I share your assessment in productivity. I feel way more productive since I've been at home. I'm way lonelier, but I'm also more productive because I don't have the interruptions and the running, physically running from meeting to meeting to meeting. And so I on so many different levels, what you've described, I think is just, it's simple and yet it is profound.
Yeah, I think that what sort of the ironic thing is I used to feel sort of guilty about it, but in reality, I really do find that, let's say back when I was a graduate student, where there was sort of this mentality like, you need to be in the lab all day, every day. And, if you're leaving early or if you're going to leave during the workday to work out, it's like you're sneaking out of the lab. You should be just chained to your desk. And there was sort of this mentality that if you're not like slaving over your computer or slaving over in the lab, it's like somehow you're being a slacker.
Right. And
it was actually when I went to work with the Army, that broke me of that mentality, because one of the things I think that they do right there is this mentality that, if you're physically fit, you're better adept at being able to do your job.
Right.
So I would have actually like mandatory exercise at 3 in the afternoon.
They PT in the morning. And my sister is in the Marines, and the same thing. When in the reserves, I said, you get paid to work out? And she said, well, yeah, that's part of our job. Yeah. And I said, my gosh, I wish I got paid to work out. But you're right. It's just a mindset of you can't do your job unless you're fit.
Yeah. And the thing that I found when that would happen, and this is where I had that epiphany, is that, I'd go do my physical fitness like workout in the middle of the afternoon, and then I would go right back to the lab. And I was just like, man, it's like night and day how productive I am in the afternoon after I've gone and worked out versus when I don't. Mm. And so that was sort of my first taste of this idea that like, actually taking these breaks made me more productive. And what I noticed too is like, before where I'd be sort of like a slave to my desk working, in the lab, I would spend a lot of time just kind of like surfing the internet or Facebook or something, because it's like my body needed that break. But then I felt this requirement that I needed to stay at my desk. And so it was, even though I was sitting there and spending all these hours, I still wasn't being more productive. And in fact, then when I started creating these habits of actually taking a real physical break and then coming back and then seeing how I was productive immediately, and I stopped, it sort of broke me of these habits of like, doing mundane surfing of the internet. And then when COVID happened and now I was forced to be in my house and not even go into lab more, it kind of even made it more extreme, where now it was like, all right, I do my little bouts of like intense work, and then I have for me immediately after my reward, well, I get to go do some laundry. Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned sort of that habit forming, but what I try to do is make it like very easy for me to do whatever that task is. So if, for example, after working on an abstract, I'm like, that's where I'm going to go for a run. I put on my clothes, my gym clothes, before I even sit down to the computer. So then literally when I'm done, all I have to do is just like get up and go out the door. There's like there's no momentum that I need to do. Or like if my goal is to like clean the floor or something, it's just the broom is out there sitting, so that as soon as I'm done, I just pick it up and I can just sweep this little area. And it's like the path of resistance to do the task, I make it as low as possible.
Wow. So there isn't preparation involved in this. This is not just a random way of being. You've thought this out and set up the reinforcements decisively and very thoughtfully.
Yeah. And then I think too, it's like you start to crave it. So, then like it sounds kind of weird, but when I was first sort of like using the running as a reward for after doing work, then after sort of getting the habit, then I started to sort of like crave it and be like, oh man, I'm getting like amped. I'm soon going to get to like go outside and run around. Whereas before I was like, all right, like let's just make it, as easy as possible for me to go from sitting here to then going outside. There's like nothing else for me to do other than stand up and go. Like I'm dressed and ready.
That bias to action. Bias to action. I love that too. Remove any obstacle. An obstacle involves thought obstacles, because as soon there's another book, something like 7 seconds to something, that if you start saying, am I gonna run? Should I run? I don't know. Is it cold? Am I hot? Am I hungry? Once you start asking yourself if you're going to do it, you're giving yourself all kinds of reasons to not do it. So that's bias to action, is you don't even think about it. I'm running. And before you know it, you're let your brain stay back at home and ponder if you should or shouldn't, but your feet are out the door hitting the street.
I think that's actually exactly how it feels. Like it's automatic. Yeah. Like even if it's raining, I don't think like, oh, I'm like, oh, nope, I'm just out the door. Like that's just it. Decision's already been made. There's nothing to argue. Right.
I love that. And you have just made me think of something that I think will require a longer conversation. Maybe somebody out there listening to the Faculty Factory podcast with Dr. Cantarero will help us think about this, or you can come back online. But I was on a call last week, and they split us into breakout rooms, and a guy in my breakout room, we were asked to, introduce ourselves, and he starts talking. He says, well, since COVID, we've really had to do more service. We're a lot more patient care. I got pulled into this, that, and the other. And he said, I don't get to stay home. And he said, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't say that, get to stay home. But clearly there was that kind of, his impression was, the PhDs, the basic scientists get to stay home. And they are on the front lines, God bless them, handling and dealing with all the stress and anxiety and fear of COVID and infection and no PPE and all the stressors, the horror that goes with this, understandably so. And I've been really thinking on that, because it sets this kind of a scenario, does set up this kind of distinction between the people who are clinicians and those who are. And they may be some envy of, wow, it's nice that you PhDs get to stay home and do research. I remember back when I used to do research, but I'm too busy saving people's lives. And you're making me think about, when you're talking about your habits and this bias to action and how you flip the switch and re-engage yourself and give yourself rewards that then recharges your battery. And it's making me think, surely our clinicians have the same preferences and rhythms and instincts and things that fill up their batteries and recharge their minds and their energy. Why do we force ourselves into doing patient care during the day? It just kind of just blew my mind. This is something that I'm sure people listening to this kind of like think, oh, please, they're maybe disconnecting right now. But for crying out loud, and I know there's some clinics and hospitals and private practices surely that have off hours, but why do we feel like clinicians have to jam all the procedures in at dark 30 in the morning and stop seeing patients at 3, 4 in the afternoon? Because certainly, patients have the same kind of rhythms that go 24 hours a day. Why can't we do surgeries that start at 7 o'clock at night? And why can't some clinicians come and see patients at 1 in the afternoon and go till 9 at night? And I'm speaking admittedly from some amount of ignorance, because some people are probably screaming, going, "We do that." But it seems to be most of the patient hospital experience that I've had firsthand, secondhand, thirdhand, when everybody I know has lately been in the hospital. Those hospitals are like, quiet for the most part, other than the ED. God bless the people in the ED. It's dark and quiet. People are working mostly during the day. Can you envision a scenario where we've had the clinicians who have the same privileges of being able to say, I've seen, 8 patients. I'll need to go out for a run, come back, see 8 more, go lift weights, come back, see 6 more. I mean, can we do that? Can you imagine that kind of a scenario?
So, I personally, I think that would be a great way to go. Again, I don't know all of sort of like the logistics that go into, running these hospitals, but I do think it would be something that would be really helpful for clinicians too, if they had a little bit more autonomy of their schedule. So, like you said, if you need to see 8 patients in a day, set it up so it's like, all right, you see a few in the morning, and then they have a break in the afternoon where they can, run errands, do a workout, whatever it is that rejuvenates them. And then they come back and they do a few more in the afternoon, have another break to do whatever, and then come back and do the rest in the evening. I know for me, like that works really well. So I would say maybe my days are a little bit longer than what I would typically be in the lab, but it's because I have those breaks in between.
Yeah.
So instead of just working, 9 hours continuously and just being done by a certain time of day, by saying, all right, I'm going to do a little bit here in the morning, do my thing that recharges me, come back, do some more work in the afternoon, do my thing that recharges me, and then come back and do a little bit more in the evening. Yeah. And then let me tell you, when I disconnect, I'm like, whew, yeah. I was good. I was productive. Right.
Yeah, I'm the same way. And now that it's home, it's a lot easier for me. And admittedly, again, my bias, or I need to tell people I live alone. I don't have kids or a partner. So I have my schedule is my own. So I can work on a Saturday morning and a Sunday afternoon. And it's easy for me to just work 7 days a week. And I feel energetic to do that. And I feel inspired to do that. And I don't resent doing that when I am interspersing my life during the week. When I see, actually, for the first time in 7.5 years working at Hopkins, I'm at home where I have a window. Actually, I have a couple windows. So I'm not in a dark office. I can actually see sunshine, which then makes me want to go outside and breathe some air. So I'm thinking that, of course, clinicians and surgeons and other practitioners are furious at us right now because they're like, you don't recognize the fact that it'd be nice to be able to do a surgery at 5 in the afternoon, but we have staff and we have all the people who clean the operating rooms, and there's a ton of nursing and support staff that go in with processing the patient and transport. It's so complex, and I get that. But I can't help but be one of these. I'm an Aquarius, so I can't help but think of like what could be versus what is, that we could totally, why not 2020? Let's just flip everything, around. I'm sure there'd be a lot of patients who would also say, sure, I'd love to have my doctor's appointment 9 o'clock at night, because then that way I don't have to miss work, So I think it's something to think about that might help to improve morale of clinicians and staff people and, anybody who works in healthcare, and certainly patients, to be a little bit creative. And now that we're doing Zoom things and telehealth, I mean, everything's upside down anyway, right?
Yeah. Now's the time to dream. So
exactly.
If there is a way to logistically figure something out like that, I do think it could help improve the quality of life. and improve a lot of this like burnout that clinicians feel, just because it's hard to be on consistently for that many hours in a row and really have no say about it.
Yeah, and so structured and regimented and just forced to march along this schedule that for some reason some people at some point in time figured out that this is when we do things. Well, like why? Why not this? Well, look at what you have inspired. Look at this. Who knows what will happen in the future where somebody heard a podcast with some crazy person suggesting that surgeries don't have to start.
Staining a deck for fun.
And staining a deck for fun. Well, on that note, Dr. Gabriela Cantarero, thank you so much for sharing your personal experiences and your personal hints for helping us think about ways to recharge ourselves and to be more productive and to enjoy our lives. And I just really appreciate you taking the time. This has been really inspiring to me, and I love these conversations. And I hope you out there listening to the podcast have also enjoyed listening to Dr. Cantarero. Till next time, everybody, take care. Thanks, Gabriela.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to Faculty Factory Podcast. The mission of the Faculty Factory is to build and support a community of leaders in faculty development who share tools, resources, wisdom, and encouragement in service to our faculty members, schools, and institutions. We encourage you to go to facultyfactory.org to find out more, get in touch with me, ask me any questions. Maybe you want to be interviewed on the podcast. Thanks for tuning in to Faculty Factory Podcast. We'll see you next time. The Faculty Factory podcast and website is sponsored by the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine Office of Faculty. For more information, visit facultyfactory.org.